What I like about my job is the work I do, talking to golfers, being at the golf course, my co-worker, and my job coach.
Why do you like working?
So I am paying the bills, working with others to learn new skills.
Awesome. Taking over for mom and dad.
There is a job for everyone who wants one, regardless of the nature of their disability, the barriers they have to employment, economic circumstance, or the need for workplace supports. At Transcend Incorporated, that is the vision that fuels our work. We are a national nonprofit and a recognized leader in providing employment services, cutting-edge training.
What I like about my job is the work I do, talking to golfers, being at the golf course, my co-worker, and my job coach.
Why do you like working?
So I am paying the bills, working with others to learn new skills.
Awesome. Taking over for mom and dad.
There is a job for everyone who wants one, regardless of the nature of their disability, the barriers they have to employment, economic circumstance, or the need for workplace supports. At Transcend Incorporated, that is the vision that fuels our work. We are a national nonprofit and a recognized leader in providing employment services, cutting-edge training and technical assistance, and participating in research, all with the goal of improving the lives of people with disabilities through meaningful work and community inclusion. So if you are an educator interested in improving student soft skills and social problem solving, a state agency looking to build capacity to utilize best practice in employment supports, or a service provider looking to transform your services to be more community-based, consider contacting us to see how we can partner together.
And that you take us where we are.
Yeah, good.
And you have a skill set that maximizes the potential of the parents and the family as well as the individual. So that's pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
That's effective. The efficacy of the program is just I can't overstate it.
I enjoyed working with Transcend because it helped me figure out what I really like to do. It helped me figure out what my dreams were, which is mostly video editing.
Transcend has been a respected voice in the fight for inclusion for over 30 years. We would love to hear from you, so please visit transcend.org, follow us on social media, or email us at inquiries@transcend.org.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for Won't You Be My Neighbor? My name is Joanne, and I'll be your technical producer. During the presentation, you may ask questions at any time by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. There is also a chat button you may use to communicate with presenters and attendees, similar to a discussion board. When sending a chat, you have the option to send either just to presenters or to presenters and all attendees. Presenters will respond to questions in the Q&A box, so please be sure to put your questions there. If you need assistance at any time, please use the Q&A box. Thank you, and I'll now turn it over to today's presenters to get us started. And just a reminder for Kathy that you're muted.
Always good to start off muted. I'm going to share my screen right away, and we'll take it away. All right. And Laurie, can you let me know? Are we looking at the screen? You can see? Great. So thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is Won't You Be My Neighbor? Opening Doors to Independent Futures. My name is Kathy Lyons. I'm the Director of New Futures Initiative at Independent Futures. Laurie, I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm Laurie Williams, and I'm the founder and president of Collaborative Community Housing Initiative.
Great. And before we get too far, we're wondering if we can just get a little sense for who's in the audience. And if there's a way to make this quick, we're hoping to see if maybe by a show of raised hands, we can get a sense if you are first a self-advocate here looking for housing for yourself.
And if you are, go ahead and click on the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. My apologies.
Thank you, Joanne. And then we'll give a couple minutes. If you are a family member of someone who might be looking for housing, or you're thinking about housing on behalf of a family member, can you raise your hand for that? And then lastly, and Joanne, let me know if I'm not leaving people enough time here, but lastly, if you can let us know if you are an educator or a service provider. That would be the last kind of category we're thinking might be in our audience. Great. All right. And I know that there's probably a few of you out there that are one of those all of the above kind of candidates. So we welcome you, but we're not going to try to figure that out. We are here to share what we hope is hopeful and positive information about community-based living for people who live with disabilities. Many of the present models of housing for individuals with disabilities do not promote a person-centered approach or focus on community engagement. And indeed, we find it's all too often that it's simply assumed that people with significant disabilities are unable to live independently. But we know that people with disabilities deserve to live where they want, with whom they want, connected to family, to friends, and their community. And we hope to share with you in the next 45 minutes or so, ideas about opportunities that have been created around the country and ideas that you can take into your home and your community with you. I'll be starting off, and for me, this work is very personal. I have a background in law and in education and in consulting, but I came to the world of people with disabilities about 21 years ago when my twin boys were born. I call them boys, they're now young men, but my Danny has Down syndrome, my Joey does not. And I tell people that I kind of got into this world because of Dan, but I do what I do now because of both of my boys and for both of my boys, because as you know, as beautifully shared this morning, the world is a better place for all of us when everyone's abilities and contributions are recognized and are welcomed. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit about Independent Futures. I work, whoops, let me get this out of the way because I can't see that. I work for Center for Independent Futures. We are a nonprofit based in Evanston, Illinois. We've been around since 2002, and we were founded by moms. We do both supporting directly individuals with disabilities who live in our general area, but we also have training and consultation services. We work with schools, we work with agencies, and we work with families like you. We have an arm that does work on person-centered planning and curriculum. And then what I do, the New Futures Initiative, is training for families who wish to create community-based housing solutions like the ones you're going to hear about today. So our philosophy and our vision and our model all are based on the fact that everyone should have access to all opportunities of a full life. We emphasize choice. We know that people learn through experience. We encourage responsibility, and we think that basically all of us are supported and sustained by relationships. So much of our work is focused on relationships. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the current realities, which aren't really, it's the depressing stuff, but I think it's important for everyone to be grounded in what the current realities are before we talk about the solutions that people are creating. So in the United States, in terms of funding and where support is coming from, only about 25% of adults with disabilities receive any kind of formal funding services. The majority are SSI, SSDI, some people get Medicaid waivers, some people, fewer, get vocational rehab services, but about 75% of the population receives no formal services or funding. And in terms of the settings where people are living, about 40 years ago, 45 years ago, 85% of people with IDD lived in institutions of 16 or more people. In the past 45 years, we've seen a major and dramatic shift away from those large state-run institutions. Currently, I think at least 17 states do not have any state-run institutions, but here in Illinois, where we live, there are still 7. What this means is actually most adults with IDD right now are living with family, and as we said before, most are not receiving any formal supports or services. And let's talk about those families. So caregivers are aging. Over half in the US right now are older than 50. 10% are actually 75 years old or older. And in terms of the sheer numbers, that's 1.3 million caregivers who are over age 60. Let's talk a little bit about the realities. People talk about the sibling succession plan, right? So as a parent, when I am unable to support my adult son or daughter, the siblings are going to jump in, right? 50% of siblings surveys say, oh yes, we will become the support system for our sibling. The reality is only about 10% really do. And also, let's talk about the reality of what home and community-based services are going to need to do by law in 2023. Those services are going to need to be integrated and supporting full access to community. They're going to need to be based on a person's needs and preferences, so what that person wants. They're going to need to allow individuals to receive services in the community to the same degree as individuals without labels who don't have a disability. And those home and community-based services need to support opportunities to work in competitive and integrated settings. So what does all this mean? All this talk about current realities, it means we need new ways to create housing, and housing that serves the needs of the people that we love. So at Center for Independent Futures, we've created New Futures Initiative, which is a step-by-step process that gives individuals and their families the ability to create supported living options in their own neighborhoods. I'm going to spend the rest of my time just sharing a little bit about the models that our families here in Evanston have created. I'm going to talk about some models that people who have been through New Futures Initiative have created across the country. And we have a couple of interesting other models that we think you should know about. Then I'm going to turn the microphone over to Laurie, who is a New Futures Initiative graduate, who's going to tell you about the amazing work that she is doing with the organization that she's founded. So here in Evanston, Center for Independent Futures supports people who live in 3 different community living options or models that families have created with us. The first on your far left is called, it's a Harrison 3-flat house. A 3-flat, for those of you that aren't familiar, is basically a house that's divided into 3 different apartments. In this house, each of the first 2 floors has a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. And up at the top in that cute little bay window, there's a 1-bedroom apartment where a Center for Independent Futures community builder lives. And he supports the 6 folks living in the 2 apartments below. He describes himself as a well-intended but nosy neighbor. So he is someone who is not a 24/7 support person. He actually has a job. He works as a transition coordinator in a special ed department in a neighboring school district. But he's around on a daily basis to check in, make sure things are going well. He's there at night and on weekends. And that is a model that's the first model that was created by families here in Evanston. The middle picture is a 6-apartment combination commercial and residential building. This was a community living option created by 12 families who came together and became an LLC. They purchased shares in an LLC to purchase the building. And in the 6 apartment buildings, one of the apartments is designated for a community builder. In this case, in 2004, our first community builder was an older woman who had a teenage son. And when she, years later, decided she wanted to retire and move to a warmer climate, her son, who was then an adult, said, well, I'd really like to stay and be the community builder. And that was wonderful. And he did. He then got married. So he and his wife were the community builders, and then they had 1 baby and 2 babies, and the family was a community builder family. And finally, just recently, after their 3rd baby, the 2nd floor walk-up 2-bedroom just became a little bit too much for the family of 5, and they've moved out to the suburbs. But it's a model that shows a kind of a different, it's a different area of town, more commercial area of town, and the commercial real estate on the bottom helps support the rent for the rest of the building. Finally, on the right, we have a condo building and families working with Center for Independent Futures. When the condo building was being created, we partnered with families, with an affordable housing developer, and with the city of Evanston to have the developer designate 5 of the 60 units to be accessible, affordable, for purchase specifically for people with disabilities. In the time since then, a 2nd condo tower has gone up, and now there are approximately 20, just short of 20 people living interspersed in condos purchased either by their families or through their special needs trusts. And we have 1 community builder living in 1 condo who supports the folks in both of the towers. I'm going to move on to just a few examples of some of the models created by people who have been through New Futures Initiative. In 2016, we worked with a group of families from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they've created both an apartment model and a condo model. They built with an affordable housing developer these complexes that were for people with and without disabilities. And in Ann Arbor, they engaged college students as community builders to support people living there. In a little bit later, 2015, we had our first group coming from the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and they have gone great guns. They've taken off and created a nonprofit called Inclusive Living Opportunities, ILO. And they didn't know each other when they first came to training, but in coming together, they realized they had a common vision in that area of creating opportunity for young adults to live independently. And as they were doing the training, they saw an apartment complex being developed in an area that was really ideal, close to transportation, close to shops, close to all the things in a community that one wants to be able to live and be walkable to. And so they approached the developer of this complex and said, you know, we have this vision. We're wondering if you would consider designating some of these rental units affordable for people with disabilities. And to their surprise, the developer immediately said yes, because in fact, he has a son with disabilities, a young son, but he saw the vision and he saw a vision for his son that he wanted to be a part of. For ILO, these are clustered, kind of supervised apartments, but there is no community builder living right on site. They have a model where a community builder who supports people in a cluster of apartments lives about 5 minutes away. And lastly, for the groups that have been trained through New Futures Initiative, wanted to tell you the story of a group that came through in 2018 through training. Families had been gathered together from the general same area of suburban Chicago. Not all the families knew each other, and certainly the young men didn't know each other, but through the process, the young men got to know each other and became friends. And one family, fairly shortly after training, felt like they had two sons that were pretty ready to go out and live in a condo by themselves with a little bit of support from family. So they found a condo nearby in a building that was, again, right close to the Jewel, our local supermarket, really close to a transportation hub. And they thought it would be a good place. So they bought a condo. Two brothers started living together. And it went so well that two other guys in the group who had been living together in apartments said, you know what? We want to live in the same place. We love this place. So their parents formed an LLC and together bought a condo in the same building. So now the four guys are living in this condo building, having a great time. You can see them living the life. And currently there's another family waiting for a unit to open up because they want to move in to more of the guys in that same building. Interestingly, in terms of supports, families are able right now to support these guys, but they really wanted to try to find someone who would encourage the guys to be a little more social and get out. And they kind of fell into a wonderful natural support at a Special Olympics benefit. One of the moms was sitting next to a woman who had coached some of the guys as a Special Olympics coach. And the Special Olympics coach was saying she had recently moved into an administrative position and really missed having kind of contact, although she liked her job, didn't really work with the same kind of day-to-day access that she had had as a coach. And the mom said, you know, told her what had been going on and said, would you be willing to be a little bit of a social director, like a Julie McCoy for our guys? And the woman said, I would love that. So couple weekends each month, she talks to the guys to find out what they would like to do, and they organize some social activities just to get out. And everybody knows it's more fun to do something with like a coach than your mom and dad. So that's a way of natural community building support that we think is a wonderful, wonderful story. I'm going to share just a couple of interesting models, not by people who went through New Futures Initiative training, but just some really cool things we're seeing develop. Luna Azul is a pocket neighborhood out in Phoenix, Arizona. It's homes that are designed specifically the way the development is constructed to encourage inclusive connections and community. The homes are clustered around a central garden area. Cars are kind of pushed to the outside of the community. And this is a model being developed by a man who has a daughter with disabilities and sees this as a way to build community for a home that she would live in as an independent person. Sweetwater Spectrum is another interesting co-housing model out in Sonoma, California. It's smaller, 16 units. This housing solution provides on-site 24/7 support for people. It was designed specifically for people with autism. And Sweetwater is doing some replication seminars, webinars, and really looking to share the way they've created their model with others in the nation, I guess. And last but not least, here in Illinois, this is work with a affordable housing developer that we know well, but shows what affordable housing looks like. It's beautiful and shows how in these two models, the collaboration between affordable housing, suburban affordable housing coalitions, support organizations for people with disabilities, and affordable housing developers came together to create some models that are specifically designated for affordable income or affordable rentals for people with disabilities. And last but not least, though, I do want to share the Commons is a kind of co-living model that is not designated for people with disabilities. In fact, the Commons is a solution to some of the very high rent and some of the most high rent cities. So New York, LA, San Francisco, DC. Here in Chicago, the models have a private bedroom or a private studio in a larger shared suite where people share the common areas like the kitchen and the living room. The units come fully furnished, kind of really high-end, nice looking, modern IKEA kind of cool stuff. The rent includes kind of the usual utilities, Wi-Fi, laundry, but there's also an included with each unit housing essentials like your pots and pans, paper towels and soap. So you kind of move right in. And the last thing that I will note is that the rent comes with a weekly cleaning service. And so, you know, who wouldn't like that? But we think this is an exciting example of how people are creating kind of co-living options for all types of people. And we think this is just a wave of the future as we go forward. In short, there are many different models. We've listed just a few, but many different models for creating supported, integrated, inclusive housing. Our New Futures Initiative process is one that allows people to begin the journey by finding their people and building their team. It helps people create that housing vision and research options. It helps people think about what are the support systems that are going to allow their individual to live independently. And it helps folks really think through what do you need to do to prepare for and then adjust to living independently. I'm not going to talk a lot because I know Laurie will talk about actions you can take now, but we really encourage, no matter where you are in this process, to continue building your networks, your community networks, your natural networks, to think about the independent living skills that you will need, both financial, administrative, all those types of things. And then to do that research and talk with other people who are out there doing this. We've got a housing guide that's available on our website and that you can download from the presentation. And I've shared my contact information, but now I'm most honored to share the stage with Laurie Williams, who is someone creating with an amazing vision and creating an amazing new community in another neighborhood near me. So I'm going to stop. Actually, Laurie, you let me know when you're ready to move on, and I'm going to move your slides for you.
Okay, why don't you move the first? Okay, great. Thanks, Kathy. Thank you for having me on this. It's lovely. And I am in an organization called Collaborative Community Housing Initiative. we call it CCHI because it's a lot easier to say. And we went through the wonderful training at CIF and the New Futures Initiative with a group of 6 other families in 2017, I believe we started. And through that process, we figured out we wanted to create an inclusive living environment in our community. We have a 26-year-old son right now with disabilities. And when he came out of transition, we started thinking long and hard about what our options would be. And the more we looked around and the more we collected data and the more we visited other projects and the more we spoke to people in the community, we figured out that having an environment that was inclusive was extremely important to our core family group. And many individuals out in our community, when we talk about inclusive living, they don't understand what that means. And we have to explain it means people who are neurotypical living with people with some sort of disability. Our primary population is intellectual and developmental disability, but we also have some others that need physical support and 24/7 support. So after New Futures Initiative, we decided to create a nonprofit and to commit to creating environments that were inclusive in Illinois. As Kathy mentioned, we're very behind the times in Illinois, and there are one of 2 options usually for people, which we will be talking about. But the goal for us is to create some different inclusive, diverse housing options and be able to replicate that to other communities in Illinois. Thank you. Our mission is to bring people of all abilities together to support a vibrant new kind of inclusive community. And we are accomplishing this through collaboration with like-minded partners such as CIF and some service providing agencies and some programming agencies and other nonprofits to create shared spaces to live, to work, to play, and very importantly for our organization, something that we can do to serve our outside neighbors. Our mantra is we are embracing inclusion and creating community connections. Our vision is to establish communities where everybody, any ability, all able, can live collectively, each determining their own path to a meaningful life. And what we all know in this group is all people have a right to choose where they live and who they live with. And we need to make sure that that includes people with disabilities. So as Kathy mentioned before, our housing shortage is pretty significant. It's very significant for people with disabilities. What is happening now is we are spending a lot of money and effort in inclusion in the educational settings, and it is working. We have such a better scenario now in the education system by and large of inclusion and accepting and people just understanding that it makes all different people, to make up a society. And unfortunately, that effort hasn't been carried over into adult life. So when we talk about people and families hitting that cliff at age 22, what it means is all this effort for inclusiveness has been wonderful, and then there's nothing. So right now, when we're looking at housing specifically, we know that people with disabilities are discriminated against in housing. We know that people, once they turn 22, are not moving out of the house to live independently or to go to college if they have disabilities. The percentage is very small with that happening. And as Kathy mentioned before, the percentage of individuals who are living with elderly parents is higher than we've ever seen it. And in our country. And what we're seeing in the United States is people with disabilities are being priced out of every market. And when they can no longer live with their families, they are at risk for homelessness or being institutionalized. So additionally, just to make things even more rosy and happy, this is Kathy, as Kathy said, this is all the bad news first. Because there are some challenges that we are facing. And when we talk about inclusive living options, it's extremely limited in Illinois. We have a one size fits all, and every single person with every different kind of disability is supposed to be served by this one model. And we all know that that just doesn't work. Those models right now are failing to include people with disabilities into the larger community, which is a huge disservice to everybody. And the models that are being done are often not scalable or financially sustainable. We have very expensive institutions. The amount of money that we are paying per person to be institutionalized is astronomical. And not only that, it's just not appropriate anymore. But we still are creating those models. And we also have a system in our country where there are very impractical rules and laws, very inflexible regulations. So people are just, they're not given the freedom or the opportunity to come up with solutions. They are told you can live in a group home, which there are no group homes. And if there is a group home that you happen to get pulled from, you may have to have your young adult move 3 to 4 hours away from you because that is the only opening in the entire state. So this is a system that is very broken, and our organization is committed to working on changing that. The other thing that we found out very interestingly is looking at these different housing models. What is happening with people with disabilities in these housing models is they are taught that they need to comply. And everyone is taught that through the education system also. If you have disabilities, you have to comply with the rest of the world. And there may be rules and there may be regulations which people with disabilities understand are not right or they're unfair, but they understand that it's just part of their life, which is the saddest thing that we have come to accept in our society. And we have normalized how restricted people with IDD, what their lives are. And right now, with the different rules and laws that are coming up, as Kathy mentioned, we need to start honoring the rights and autonomy of people with disabilities. And we need to, instead of giving people with disabilities protections, we don't need to protect them. We need to include them, and we need to treat them, as you all know, as part of society. And the Olmstead Act determined that people with disabilities have the right to receive services in the most integrated setting appropriate to their needs. We need to make sure that that carries over to the living environment and the adult life. It is definitely being addressed in a robust way in the education system, but it really isn't in adult living. People with disabilities should receive supports in the most integrative setting possible and have the same opportunity to access community as people without disabilities. So when we came about doing this, we decided that we wanted our we call them projects, and that's a poor word, but our communities are going to be mixed income and mixed ability. Everyone in our core group, in our organization, feels that inclusion is the way to go with living options. We know it has to be affordable for part of the population. We know that the people who have SSI, SSDI, and a part-time job still fill in the number of extremely low income, which is 20% or lower of the AMI. You also have 60% AMI, and moderate is 80% AMI. So that whole mix, and if that can be included with market rate, it's a very nice balance and it's sustainable. The affordable housing models in Illinois are very regulated towards either it's affordable in 100%, or it is a market rate with less than 10% of the apartments available for people who are low income. And when we talk about low income, we are addressing everybody. We are not addressing just people with disabilities. So the way it works is there's a referral network. People on the referral network is anyone below poverty. And all of those people are being given opportunities to be placed in affordable housing opportunities, but people with disabilities are not, because they're not even registering the 20% or under for low income housing. So we have a catch-22 here. When we looked at all these different inclusive living situations, we determined that the range of 25 to 35% of units will be reserved for people with disabilities, and that 65 to 75 would be for people who work and serve the community, who possibly can't afford to live in the community, which might be college students, senior citizens, hospital employees, teachers, firefighters. They would live in the other 65 to 75% of a building. And our focus on inclusion makes this community really ideal for people who value diversity, who want to live in an interesting community, who don't want everybody to be the same and look the same. And it's extremely attractive to people who have been raised in that kind of mentality. For our first community, we knew that it had to be a walkable community. We wanted it to be accessible for our residents to be able to go to work or to go anywhere they wanted. So it needs to be close to public transportation. We know we wanted it to be walkable because we want everyone to be able to have access to something. And if people need a ride somewhere, or if they need to get transportation somewhere, it really limits the opportunities they have. So instead of getting in a cab to go to a grocery store, they just won't go to the grocery store. So we need to make sure that somebody can go right out their door and they can have access to a restaurant and a grocery and a pharmacy and a train or a bus. And it also needs to be a community where there's already some niche of understanding of inclusivity or diversity. We have looked at a lot of different communities around our area. There are some that just don't want to have the conversation about disability and housing. And it's super important for us that all the communities we're working on, that we are starting with communities that are open to having the conversation, because if we can make models work in those kind of communities, the other communities will see that and they will have a reason to come on board. Our first location is in downtown Highwood, which is a very small community here, sandwiched in the North Shore of Chicago. So when we went about doing this, we realized that we needed a lot of support. Obviously, we needed government support. We needed the businesses in the community to support, and we needed the neighborhood and the neighbors to support. NIMBYism is very prevalent in our area, which is not in my backyard, meaning if somebody with disabilities lives next door, it is going to lower the value of their home. Or if there is a affordable housing, that is going to lower the value of the home. So it's very important that you have government support so that you can address those things in a very robust way. Resources, we need, funding and grants and donations. It's extremely expensive. Our first project, we are estimated at about $18 million for a 40-unit building. So very, very expensive, and the amount of support that the government is giving is possibly limited. You need a determined group. All the people who are committed to our project, thankfully, are extremely committed, but we also have a community that is committed to diversity that is working with us. And we need all of that to be successful in any community that we try to work with. So what we envisioned and what we are actually making happen right now is we originally visioned a 60 to 100 unit apartment building. We are, for our first go around, having a 40 unit apartment building because that happened to have fit in the regulations for this particular financial model for us to be able to execute this living arrangement. So we have 40 units. It will be a mix of all levels of affordable housing. It will be all rental, and there will be a first floor that actually is 4,000 square feet, which will be divided up for different things. We know going in that, and this is pre-COVID, that we need community spaces. We need a community kitchen. We need areas where people can hang out and socialize. We need green spaces. We need people to be able to have an opportunity to have fresh air every single day. We want to have a business or several that serves the outside community and possibly offer vocational opportunities for people in not just in our residential building, but also everywhere else. We are having a space for offices and meeting spaces for service providers that will be supporting the individuals with disabilities in the building. And we need to make sure that however we're creating this, that we can duplicate it in the best way possible. All the apartments will have universal design. There's going to be there is a sensitivity towards people aging in place, and also a sensitivity towards people who have sensitivities of lighting, sensory issues, toxic, any of those things are being addressed in the building of this, as well as technology. We are digging very deep into technology supports. Now that we've had COVID, we know how much it makes sense, but we were looking at this pre-COVID saying what kind of technology is out there that can help support an individual living in the community in the best way possible. The other big component for us is programming. We cannot create a inclusive community without actually building the community and building the relationships. Building a building will not build a community. So that was very good advice that we got many years ago, and it's proven to be very true. We are set up to have programming for not just our individuals, but for everybody else. So we went out and we started doing pizza nights and cooking things and yoga classes. And we have a donation and a volunteer day every single month. And so these are things that we are doing to build the outside community so that being with people with disabilities isn't so scary for people. And part of this also is our collaboration with other organizations. We have a lot of organizations in the area that really want to support something like this. They just don't know how. So the best way about it is we just sit down and talk to them and tell us what we're doing, tell them why we're doing it, and tell them what the obstacles are.
Pardon the interruption, just to let you know that we have less than a minute. And we do have some questions in the Q&A box.
Okay, so I will just say all of this is available for everybody to read and download. We offered some best practices of what we learned going through it. We also offered a timeline so everyone can see how long certain things took and kind of where things happened and fell. And then finally, we have our group, a lot of community outreach, senators, governors, congressmen, mayors, These are group meetings pre-COVID, which were wonderful. Now we have them all Zoom. We have monthly family get-togethers. We used to have them in person. Now we have twice a month get-together via Zoom. And that is our group, our individuals for what we are doing this for.
Thank you so much. We have reached the end of our session. We need to bring this one to a close in order to prepare for our next session. Thank you so much for joining us and enjoy the rest of your conference experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.